NBA players make a stupid amount of money. It's supposed to be simple math. You pay more money for the really good athletes. Last year's MVP, Giannis, made $25 million in 2019. So for those not following the NBA, you'd probably think it'd be rare for the opposite to happen, paying similar sums for just average performance. But this happens all the time. This is a story about that. We're going to find the worst, highest paid NBA player ever, and that's going to require some advanced statistics, so bear with me. We'll use a stat called VORP, or Value Over Replacement Player. It's basically how good someone is over your average NBA player who could come off the bench. It's one number that captures a player's overall performance based on a very complex equation that accounts for many metrics, like playing time, rebounds, steals, points, and turnovers. So with that, we have a single measure to judge player performance. When ranking players by VORP, we see the usual suspects at the top, such as Michael Jordan's 88-89 season, his 87-88 season, LeBron's 08-09 season, Bron's 09-2010 season, and David Robinson's 93-94 season. Okay, so to figure out who's overpaid, we're going to plot performance measured with VORP on the left-hand side, and along the bottom we have players' salaries. Last year, Harden produced more for his team than Steph according to VORP, but made about $5 million less. And here's a chart showing every player from 2019. The worst, highest paid player can't be injured or bench warming, they need to be on the court playing terribly. This chart also excludes players who had under 1,300 minutes for the year, which is a little over 15 minutes per game. Among the highest paid underperforming players is Andrew Wiggins, who in 2019 was the 19th highest paid player in the league, but ranked 210th in VORP. Now Wiggins is clearly overpaid, taking home about the same amount as a 2019 MVP. But if we went back through every season, are there players farther to the bottom right of this chart, making more money and even worse on VORP? Here's a good way to think about this. Divide up the chart into rectangles. Great contracts for the team are in the upper left, with high performance and lower pay, and economic travesties for the NBA are in the bottom right, high pay and low performance. And I poured through so many salaries and contracts from each year, but I did manage to narrow it down to 14 people, and we'll look at them one by one. In 2018, there's Mello, 9th in salary and second worst VORP in the league. We'll come back to Mello in a bit, but he's clearly a contender for NBA market failure. In 2016, we have Kobe Bryant, the highest paid player in the NBA, and this is where the process gets fun. He's clearly underperforming on his salary, but it's also his last year in the league. He's playing the second year of a 2-year contract extension, something that allowed him to retire a Laker. And statistically, he had a pretty decent season in 2013 from a VORP perspective, right before he signed that contract. So while he's technically financially disappointing, I'm kinda okay with it. He's underperforming with a lot of reasonable disclaimers. Slightly better than Kobe, but equally paid is Joe Johnson. He's also on the tail end of a huge contract, but it was one that he signed in his prime at 29, 6 years earlier. So in 2016, he's 35, and father time is caught up. Plus, I doubt the Hawks, who gave him that contract, imagine he'd keep up his numbers. And here's Derrick Rose at year 4 of a 5-year, $94 million contract, or in today's dollars, north of $100 million. He signed this contract after his MVP 2011 season, but the ACL injury in 2012 led to a steep decline in mediocre seasons. He's off our list of candidates since he only played 66 games that year, and Chicago never could have anticipated this decline. So now we have a few reasons for why players don't deliver on the money they're paid: age, injury, and loyalty. That last one, loyalty, meaning that teams pay more so that players can retire with their career team. In 2014, we have Amar'e Stoudemire, coming off of injury-ridden seasons following a huge 2010 contract he signed with the Knicks. And here's Gilbert Arenas in 2011, who is just injured all the time. We also have Rashard Lewis, who sat out about 20 games due to injury and split his season on a trade with Orlando. And in 2010, we have Jermaine ONeal. This dot over here represents a 7-year, $126 million contract that he signed in 2003. At the time, it seemed to be worth it. Jermaine ONeal, at 25, had a huge season with the Pacers, and he was about to enter his prime in his late 20s. But father time did take its toll. This dot represents the final year of that 7-year contract at 32 years old. So it's basically the same story with Iverson in 2009. He was playing last year of a 4-year deal he signed in his prime, and he was traded in 2009 from the Nuggets to the Pistons, playing only 54 games due to injury. This is a 34-year-old Michael Finley in 2008. He's on the last year of a $100 million contract that he signed in 2001, which is worth closer to $150 million inflation-adjusted dollars today. In 2006, Jalen Rose is basically Michael Finley but aging faster. who signed a 7-year, $94 million contract in 2000. Next, we have Stephon Marbury. His first full year with the Knicks was his best, but after that, the well-known team chemistry issues might explain his performance decline. In 2006, he's just 29, the fourth highest paid player in the NBA, and a shell of his former self, performing no better than an average player in the league. Going back to 2004, we finally hit Allan Houston and his $100 million 6-year contract he signed in 2001, which is worth about $140 million adjusted for inflation. His mediocre performance against his contract is one of the reasons the NBA has the Allan Houston rule, which allows teams to opt out of a luxury tax for one contract. He played only 50 games in 2003 to 2004, but it's clear that even in his prime, he wasn't performing at an elite level. Here we have 27-year-old Juwan Howard, who 3 years earlier had signed the NBA's first $100 million contract that ran 7 years. He only had spent 3 years in the league when he signed this contract in 1996, but even then the results were questionable for the payday. And right next to him we have Patrick Ewing, who at 38 is basically paid to retire a Knick. We have salary data going farther back, but much of it was speculative and there are no verified sources, so we'll stop at the 2000 season. Okay, so here's who we have left: Mello, Marbury, Allan Houston, and Juwan Howard. I thought a lot about this, but there's one way to settle it. Here's every year on one chart, and that's Mello during the 2017 to 2018 season with OKC. He plays 78 games, 32 minutes per game, and has one of the highest salaries in the history of basketball. He signed this contract following a great season, 2014 to 2015, but the fall was swift. It was a huge contract that made him the second highest paid player the following year, but that fall, it's just unprecedented.